So I just wanted. That's great. That was a gold quote right there, Terry. That 1 minute there, because I picked these little things out and I repost them. Thank you. Well, a principle is a principle because it doesn't change, does it? It can be whether it's, whatever you want to call it, cell grazing, time control grazing, managed grazing in the territory. The principles apply there as they do at Boorowa.
Yep.
Or your
That's
poon.
right. Yeah.
So let's jump to RCS of today. Just give, for those sort of listeners who aren't familiar necessarily with the charter of RCS. And before you do, I'm just going to do a little quick. I mentioned it before. I did grazing for profit in about 2005, and the month before I did it, the only reason I went to it was because I did a one-day course called Profiting from the Drought. And I reckon you guys should use that line somewhere when the next drought, because that gets people going, you fucking serious?
Yeah.
Like, what do you mean? It got me the next month of the week, life-changing stuff, and then I did the what's the one? The next one, not Executive Link, before Executive Link.
It was Graduate Link.
Grad Link. Did the Grad Link for 12 months, and then did the Executive Link for 3 years. Yeah. And I have to say, it's one of the things that created the structure and the friendships and the relationships that still exist today. That got me on my own regenerative journey. Really got me off to a wonderful start. Didn't know much about holistic management at all, to be honest. It's just, I guess, once you're exposed to one kind of stream, in this case, it was kind of, that was enough. I didn't need to kind of crowd my head with more stuff. It was enough on that. So thank you, Terry, for creating a business way back then that has influenced. How many grads have you run through, you reckon?
I'm not sure actually, but it'll be somewhere around 7,500, 8,000, maybe 9,000. That's through the long schools.
Yeah.
But when you look at number of people through all schools, like short courses and so on,
yep.
Yeah, it's probably 10, 12,000 more, something like that. I don't know.
And when you consider, you hear different sort of numbers, but is 140,000 farmers in Australia? Is that right, or something like that? That's pretty good. That's a pretty fair proportion.
Yeah.
Percentage that have been exposed to this pretty, I believe, pretty critical information. So tell us about RCS now, Terry. What's your role in the business, and kind of what are the sort of the main focus for RCS now?
I think my role's now sort of more of a bit of a father figure in the company. I don't run it. I've got a really, really good team. In the management team, there's 5 people there that are just brilliant at their jobs and got the passion and the ability to take it forward. So I don't get involved in the management. I still sort of help. I guess I'm the keeper of the vision in a way. Yeah. And the vision has been the reason for our existence since the early 90s, and it's kept us going. We've been through bad times, we've been through good times, and like any business, we have our droughts as well, and I think that sticking to the vision and knowing why we're in business, that's really, really important. I guess the keeper of the vision is probably one of my main roles. And
can you articulate that vision, like
the really short version of that vision is that we support farmers who are the most noble professionals in the world to deliver on their real purpose, which is healthy food production. That's the short version. We've lived by the long version for 30 years. I don't know whether you want the long version or not.
Yeah, no, it's up. Yeah, bloody oath.
Right.
We're in an elevator, and I've just rocked in and seen this good-looking old silver-haired rooster, and I'm going, what do you do, mate?
Well, I think in a nutshell, we transform agriculture and empower people. Because you don't actually make transformation without empowering the people to make the transformation. We don't make it, and I've always said that my role is not to change. I can't change agriculture. I can facilitate the change or help the change or guide the change, and that's our role. And our real vision is to see the soils in agriculture becoming healthier, growing organic carbon, no bare ground, growing plants that are that are healthy, that don't require a lot of props and chemicals to prop them up. With animals grazing those that are healthy and productive and are maintenance free. We want to see people achieving their goals, their visions, their dreams, and doing that forever. We want to see the family farms continue for thousands of years, and we want to see them, making profit, having fun, and whatever their level of productivity, production, whether it's cropping, whether it's grazing, whatever it is, that they're actually utilising sunlight and rainfall effectively, and looking after the ecosystem, and that we can all still be farming in 5,000 years' time.
I love the reference to thousands of years. Yesterday, episode 53 came out on the Regenerative Journey, Nat Kelly, and she's a Peruvian-born, Australian, LA-based actress, there's a mouthful, and she references Indigenous cultures' intention of looking 7 generations in front. That's how they make decisions.
Yeah.
And so that conjures up, that's, I don't know how many years is a generation? Is it 30, 40, 70? I don't know what it is, but 1,000 years, that is a noble cause, isn't it?
It is, and I've always sort of thought that far in advance, because that's where we need to be thinking. We can't be thinking about tomorrow or this week. We've actually, when you're running land or you're managing an ecosystem, you've got to be thinking the long term for it, and we've got to be thinking generations in front. One of the epiphanies I had once was I was in Argentina, and we met a family that had a 700-year vision, and they were farming 100,000 hectares at that stage, and they didn't own any of it. And what they said was that because even if they took over a farm on a 1-year lease, they farmed it as though they were going to farm it for 700 years. And they said what had happened would then the landowner would come back and say, gee, we like what you're doing to the land, you can go for another 4 years, and the leases would keep getting extended. And I just loved that idea of having that 700 years, or that much longer vision of what it is you're trying to achieve.
Talking about achieving things too, Terry, let's talk about the conference that's coming up in 16th and 17th of July here in Brisbane, Vegas. Not too far from here, isn't it? The exhibition, it's not far from here, is it?
That's right, yeah. Just across the river.
Tell me when this bloody Kubota ZD121 gets out of the way. Tell us about the conference.
We every 10 years, we started 20 odd years ago, and we ran a conference to celebrate 10 years of grazing for profit in Australia. And what we wanted to do is look 10 years in advance. What's coming up? Where do we need to be thinking? Where do we need to be taking our guidance for the next 10 years? And so we brought people like Arden Anderson and Elaine Ingham, the Soil Food Web and Soil Health and that sort of stuff out here then. And then 10 years after that, we did another one, and we looked 10 years out again. Where do we go from there? And that's when we started introducing Patrick McManaway and subtle energy.
I want to talk about him.
And animal health, sort of human health and things like that coming into the system. And now what we're seeing is a whole lot of convergence happening globally. And so the name of this conference is Convergence. And we're looking at where's the convergence in microbiomes, for example. We started out in microbiomes, and really there's a massive knowledge converging around microbiomes. There's a convergence of human health and land health and soil health and crop health. So we need to understand how those are starting to come together. Where's that future lie? What's the future economies look like? What's the future for money? What's the future for us? Where should we be focusing in the next 10 years to be continuing to lead in regenerative agriculture going forward? And so what we see at the moment is a whole lot of things converging, and we want to bring those together and see what comes out of that to give us the direction over the next 10 years.
What do you reckon might come out of it? Where do you, knowing what you know a fair bit, what do you see are the important things to focus on the next 10 years?
I don't want to preempt the conference because I really don't. I really don't know what'll come out, because we've got some of the best minds in the world coming together.
Who are some of them? Zach Bush?
Well, Zach Bush.
He's going to be virtual.
Yes, yeah. And
surely you can't fly over and bring him back?
Well, it's all this, the way we treat COVID is putting them off. And John Kempf now, who's one of the world leaders really in Regen Ag.
Yeah.
Charlie Massey, who's learnt a lot, I believe, since called the Red Warbler, and has been working with Hawkins. What's his name?
I can see the book. Drawdown.
Yeah, but on the new book on regeneration.
Yes.
And the involvement of regeneration of agriculture and Regen Ag in regenerating the planet. And so I'd really like to learn from Charlie is how do we see that coming together.
Yeah.
What I see is that there's a very narrow focus at the moment on carbon. And carbon is one molecule, and it's one thing that affects the climate system, which is only one system on Earth that's in trouble. And so we run the risk at the moment of focusing on this one tiny little thing and forgetting that our oceans are in trouble. There's too much plastic in the oceans. Our health systems are in trouble. Our biodiversity is declining. Our soil health declining. So much is going wrong globally. And we're off focused on reducing CO2 in the atmosphere, and I think that there's a real danger in that. So I think we've got to step back and be a lot more holistic. Agriculture offers the solutions for so much that's going on in the world right now. And how do we bring that together? How do we help the rest of society heal itself? And we've got to firstly do that by healing ourselves. It's the old physician, heal thyself first. Saying, and I think with agriculture and farming, that's where we've got to start. We've got to start by healing ourselves, healing our land. Then we can start healing society with better quality food and a better environment to interact with, and all sorts of stuff, and all sorts of learnings that people can learn from us. So I would hope that there's a lot of stuff like that is where the conference will start to converge.
Which I love the sort of the concept, the theme of convergence, because it's a convergence of ideas and minds, isn't it? And people. I mean, literally, what a lovely thing for people to look forward to actually converge at a conference. I mean, I can't remember. I went to the Albury conference last year, but like that's just, people don't do conferences anymore.
No.
What a wonderful opportunity for people to come together and share. It's interesting, and it's a great point about the kind of, carbon's one molecule, and it's part of such a big functioning, ecosystem, ecology, world, global environment, and we forget about so many other things. It's not dissimilar. I don't want to bang on about COVID too much, but it's like the whole idea about that, what was put in place by government mandates and masks and all that sort of stuff was to sort of save lives. And that was the focus. It's like, we're going to focus on carbon because that's the thing that's. Yeah. No, we're going to focus on this because that's going to save. But there was no consideration. Well, if there was, they threw it out the window of all of the other consequences.
That's right. Yeah.
And I think we might have touched on it back in Albury about just the health of people, just the isolation and the literally being isolated kills people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's going to be so many downsides to the way this was handled for the next 20, 30, 40 years.
Business-wise, mental.
Just mental health-wise, health-wise for children.
Yep.
Locking little kids in a house, not giving them access to this nature that we started talking about, access to.
Well, there was that footage of the whoever it was with a big concrete barrier putting it on a skate park or something somewhere so the kids couldn't use the skate ramp, so they weren't drawn to go out there, or helicopters cruising around going, get out of the park, go home, whatever it was in Sydney. And the irony was, when the flood, so they were out there willy-nilly doing that, And the irony of the floods, they couldn't get helicopters there for a bloody week.
Yeah.
And the ones that did turn up were carting the media around.
Yeah.
When there were people sitting in their bloody roofs of their homes for 3 or 4 days with no food. Oh, don't get me started.
It's a screwed up society, isn't it?
So 16th, 17th of July here in Brisbane. We'll put a link in the show notes for tickets. And I'm really looking forward to it because I know in 2020 you had it booked in, didn't you?
Yeah.
And Zach Bush was going to come back out because he'd been there in March that same year.
All the speakers were going to come in 2020.
Yeah.
So now, unfortunately, a lot of the really key people, the Americans, are not travelling. We may have Jacqueline McGlade. She may be in Australia. She's a real guru in natural capital.
Oh yeah.
Her background is incredible, and she was head of the EU environmental section for many years. Then she was the chief scientist in the UN for many years, and now she's on a crusade to help monetise and measure natural capital, and she's amazing, and so she's one of our keynote speakers. Well, not many people have probably heard of Jacqueline, but
No.
she's somebody that you're going to hear a lot more of in the future, I think.
Awesome.
Incredible. One of the things that makes her incredible, she's professor at 2 universities, got almost, I don't know how many degrees, but she lives with her husband, who is a Maasai chief in an African village in Kenya.
Wow.
So she's grounded.
Totally.
Not only is she, an incredible scientist, but she's grounded.
That's awesome. I didn't know that.
And she's a systems thinker.
And so is she going to be here? No, you're not sure.
Well, she's hoping to be out here,
Yeah.
so we're hoping that she's going to be here.
Let's talk about natural capital for a minute, Terry, because I know we had a little joke there before we started. Your involvement in that element. Well, you've been involved with that element, I guess, since the point of conception. There was carbon in you somewhere, but your interest and your involvement and your influence in the carbon. I use the word carbon market, but I guess the concept of carbon having a value and farmers leveraging that, as you say, and I totally agree. I think that's where you sort of headed. There's carbon, and which is one part of a natural capital kind of portfolio, if we can use that word. Tell me about, where do you see it going? I mean, let's talk about Carbon Link, because you've been at that for some time, and slogging away, and pioneering, and then there's been a tipping point, hasn't it?
Yeah, I started thinking about carbon in 2000, and because we've got a lot of people that have been doing on the regenerative agriculture path that have been putting carbon into soils, and I wanted to see them get paid for that. I eventually got around to setting up Carbon Link in 2007.
2007, that long ago?
Yeah, and we're going to be issuing our first credits this year.
Good on you.
So I think that, and if I'd known then what I know now, I never would have started. I was just too naive, too stupid.
Well, not stupid.
Well, no, I've always been stupid.
Oh, that's right. You're the D-man.
I am, and I'm always, but I'm also a risk taker.
You were one of the pioneers of that market.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's not stupid at all. That's bloody.
No, nowadays it doesn't look stupid.
No, not at all.
But looking back at how naive I was, and what had to be done to get to where we are today,
you might have balked at it a bit.
Oh yeah, like the cost in time, the opportunity cost, the actual personal cost, all that sort of stuff has been enormous.
Yeah.
But we'll get there this year, and we'll be an instant success after only 20 odd years. and I think that, so I think where we are on carbon is that firstly there's a market for carbon, and so that's why there's a lot of talk about carbon now. It's real, and our first guys are going to get issued with carbon this year, and that's exciting because they were first measured in 2016. There's 5 properties involved there, over 18,000 hectares through Queensland and into New South Wales. They have all had at least 2 years of drought out of the 5.
Yeah.
One of them's had 2 floods. One of them was totally burnt out in the 2019 fires. So they've had everything thrown at them. The Queensland guys have had the central and North Queensland guys have had pasture dieback thrown at them as well through that whole period. And despite all of those obstacles, they have sequestered carbon, and they will have carbon credits for sale this year.
So through the ups and the downs, after that 5 year, there's a net
gain. Even though on parts of some of their properties they've actually lost carbon in the soil surface, which is in the top 30 centimetres.
Yeah.
And so we've actually got enough data at the moment to be able to do a bit of economic comparison. And the economic comparisons are interesting. So average net income from carbon across these properties over the last 5 years per hectare per annum has been around $70 at the current price of carbon.
That's if they were to, with the net gain, that's the value that is available to them in theory. Is that?
Yeah, it's gone a bit beyond theory now. There's actually credits now being developed.
Yeah.
And there's a number on those. So there's still a bit.
It's an asset though, isn't it? Like it's $70 per hectare, right? Of asset, which could be put on the balance sheet somewhere. Well, it
will be
one day.
Yeah. And we're talking millions this year.
Yeah.
So these guys who were pioneers and stuck their neck out and were game to give this a go back when there wasn't a market, when it was really dicey. So anyway, to me the beauty of what it is they've been through all the normal stuff that agriculture gets hit with, and they've still sequestered carbon, and they've sequestered enough for it to exceed the value of livestock production over the same period.
Wow.
And the net value of livestock production.
Yeah.
All right. So if I compare EBIT per hectare per annum over that same 5 years for those properties to the EBIT per hectare per annum from carbon over those years, carbon exceeds the EBIT from livestock production.
It's a sleeper, isn't it?
It's a sleeper. Now that's a subtropical environment. It's probably going to get better as it goes further south, although productivity gets higher as you go further south as well. So I don't know what how that ratio will hold as we go further south in Australia. But to me, that's now been proven. It works. The practices that people are using work. These were all really good managers. They're very good cell grazers. And it's the management practice that does it.
Well, that's it. It goes hand in hand. So as you know, I'm generalising in some ways, as productivity goes up because of the management, it's actually that management that is, making the producing, in a funny way, carbon as well, isn't it?
Yeah.
Or it's actually banking that carbon.
Yeah. At the same time, just recently, we've also, on 4 of those properties, have measured and valued natural capital.
Yeah.
And the average valuation on natural capital on a per annum per hectare basis is about 3 times the value of the carbon.
So it's 70 per hectare of carbon, and it's say maybe 3 for the natural. So when you say natural capital, what are we also including in that those assets or that potential?
So that is including now the trees. So for example, a soil carbon project doesn't include the growth or improvement in the ecosystem through more trees, etc. Having more bird species, having more ground cover, having more biodiversity. It also includes social, so there are people within that who, in the pilot project that we're currently running with natural capital, that are also contributing to the community. So they're opening up their farms, they're helping other people learn, and so that has a value as well. That has a social value, and you can put a value on that. Then a lot of that data was collected using satellite imagery plus photographs, records over time. And the difference between the natural capital project and a carbon project is in the natural capital we've been able to go back into the past and look at, so we can reward the pioneers. Whereas a carbon project, if you've been doing regenerative for 20 years, your carbon project gives you nothing for that. It starts from the moment you baseline. So. Whereas a natural capital, we've got tools and processes to be able to go back into the past. So I think that I'm hoping now that the it's been through a reasonably rigorous process now to put a value on this stuff. The next step is to see, can it be marketed? Where's the market, and is there a
is there
volume?
an appetite?
Yeah, and it's got to be a volume market.
Yeah.
And I'm not talking, a biodiversity subsidy from the federal government, that sort of stuff. I think subsidies out of government don't last. They'll last a political cycle. They're not big enough to make a difference. This stuff's got to be market driven. Carbon now is being market driven. To me, over the next 3, 4, 5 years, I think we will see natural capital step up and become as big an item as carbon. And I hope that it is, because natural capital includes carbon.
Yeah.
So if you've done a carbon project and you've got a natural capital project on top of that, you subtract the income from the carbon project off your natural capital project.
To see what that, what sort of portion that is.
That's right.
Well, I'm quite aware of that natural capital project being involved, and I very excited for the way that it's structured and the potential. As you say, next steps are, is there an appetite for that kind of a natural capital value that can be leveraged as a farmer and can be utilised as someone who buys that or gets involved in that market. So I'm really excited about it. It's the most exciting thing I've heard coming out of the natural capital space for years. And as you say, Terry, natural capital is all of it, and carbon's a portion. And I remember going to a carbon. Wasn't even a conference, it was a one-day bloody yarn in 2006 or 7 in Young, at the S&C Club in Young. And I, up until probably 12 months ago, was no wiser with all of that in that period of time, from 2006 or 7 to say last year, just because all we heard about was carbon and the carbon market and what the price of carbon was, and the other thing that gets up my goat is as you say, subsidies, and not too far from that is kind of, the selling of those carbon credits, or a business saying, "Oh, we're carbon neutral." Is it carbon neutral when you? I can't remember. They're positive or negative. Like, they're like we're actually sequestering, or we are responsible for sequestering more carbon than we're putting out through our production, and then finding out, and this is a farm, and then finding out that they're actually doing that because they're planting trees in India. Like, to me, that's just ludicrous. Like, can't you put trees on your farm, or measure the carbon you're putting into the ground through your grazing, or whatever the natural capital kind of activities? And I just think that is, it's sort of got, it's just gone off. It's just gone off the rails a bit.
That's right, and that's the risk with picking on this tiny little molecule right out on the edge of stuff.
Poor old carbon.
But there is a market for it. It will help drive regen ag, I believe, and for that reason I'm staying involved in it. But we're much more excited about the bigger picture around natural capital and the flexibility we've got around that. So it being a commercial-based process, it's not bound up in the same amount of red tape that a carbon project is, and therefore I think it'll fly much faster and much further. Well, at least I'm hoping that.
Well, and I also think it's going to be more not at the whim of, but it's involved in a it's a commercial public. When I say public, as in not government, kind of tied up marketplace, which is, it's been tied up for all those years, and this seems to me like, anything that it had, got up some speed and actually was successful, never started because government got it going.
No, that's right.
It's always been private investment and entrepreneurship and adversity, that actually gets it going. And then, you throw some subsidies at it. It's a bit like schools, in the Steiner School situation where, they had a charter and so on, and then as they sort of got used to be on the teat of government getting the dollars and the funding, it's like things were compromised because they were so used. And all land care is exactly the same thing. Let's talk about subtle energy, one of my favourite topics. We knew you were going to get to it. Tell me, you mentioned Patrick, the amazing Patrick who I was banging on last night to a few people about, because he's been to Hannah, he's been to a property of ours up in the Northern Rivers, and I have referred him to many people. Tell me about that is there going to be subtle energy action at the conference?
It will come into a number of talks. So we've got Diane and Haggerty, for example, and Diane and a lot of their business is based on using and understanding subtle energy and working with energies in their business. We've actually got a session with Sarah McCrum on the consciousness of money, and she's written a really, really good book on that. And it will come into, there's a number of topics. It's sort of, because of convergence, it converges with a whole lot of other stuff. And you've got Zach Bush, I'm sure Zach will mention it, and several other speakers, all understand that the energy side of this is just as important as anything else.
Is Charlie Massey, is he into solar energy? Is he doing much of that?
Well, Charlie doesn't speak about it publicly, but he is. But I know he'd written a chapter for his book, which the publisher wouldn't allow him to publish because it was too far out there. But that chapter has now turned up in another book that's being written by an academic in the UK, and I'm pretty sure Patrick might be a co-author in that book as well.
So with permission?
Yeah.
Okay. They didn't just get it.
No. Charlie's. I think Charlie might have a couple of chapters in that book. So so he's actually sticking his head up above the parapet in that new book, which I'm not sure when that comes out or even what it's going to be called.
Talk us through it, Terry. Subtle energy and kind of what is it and where does it fit in agriculture? Like, why did you get into it? Maybe start there. On the personal side.
Why did I get into it? I got into it
because you're a bit of a weirdo.
What happened?
That's why.
Yeah, I know. Well, I was a real weirdo. I was at a biodynamics workshop one day, and there was a set of books there, and I walked up to the books, and for some reason or other, my hand grabbed. It's got a metal block. A book called The Field by Lynn McTaggart.
Yeah.
And I read that book. And I couldn't put it down. I thought, geez, this is, like, I'd never thought about this stuff. And as I read that, suddenly in my mind, things became clearer. I could suddenly separate the difference between spirituality and religion. Two entirely different things, and the reasons why they're different. And so I was able to grow a bit through that book. And it taught me that there's a lot of stuff out there that science can actually measure or do stuff with. But doesn't fully understand. But what I understood from that is that there is a science, and that science is in quantum physics. And so an understanding for me that there was a science backing it, well, then that sort of made it a bit more legitimate. And then we started experimenting with it in RCS, so we introduced various groups to little bits of stuff. And one of the gurus we brought out from the States actually started us off on it as well. And he taught us how to dowse.
Remember who it was?
Phil Wheeler.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
He's written a few good books.
Yeah. And so, and then he introduced us to the radionics machines and radionics. And
how long ago is this, just roughly? Like, what are you thinking?
About 2000.
Yeah.
So 22 years ago, I suppose. Somewhere about
that far away. That far back. Yeah, cool. Yeah.
Well, I've been weird for a long time. And so
when you started getting D's, you started being a bit weird.
Yeah. And then
maybe it was when you fell off that horse.
Yeah, that might have been it. Yeah.
When you were 3. Might have knocked your head.
Yep. So then we started mucking around with it in RCS, and I got a bit of an interest in it. But I guess one of the things that really switched me was one day I'd finished teaching a course somewhere in New South Wales. I think it was a grazing clinic or something, and there was only one person left at the end of the day. And anyway, so I said to her, well, let's have dinner together. So we did, and we were talking, and she said she was a psychic. And that sort of interested me a little bit, and for some reason or other we started talking about our son, and our son Sean, who we went to the interview with in the Northern Territory, died while we were in the Northern Territory. Hadn't been there long, and he drowned. And so I'd probably never really grieved, and I just buried myself in work to try and get around that. And anyway, she said, oh, so he came up and she just said to me, he's here. And I said, what do you mean he's here? She said, he's right here in the room, he's right here. And she said, he's been waiting for you to talk to him for 20 odd years. And I thought, righto. So I went home and I talked to Pam about it, and then we had a big cry about it, and it was the first time we'd actually been able to talk about him. And anyway, I said, righto, I want to sign. And so we were visiting his grave not long after that, and the wind started to blow and my hat blew off, and I just sort of out of the blue said, oh mate, can you stop the wind blowing while I get my hat? And the wind just stopped. It just stopped like that.
Yeah.
I went and picked my hat up,
put
it back on, got it, went back, and the wind started blowing again. I thought, right, that's one.
Yeah.
Later that day, we were going to the Woodford Folk Festival, and we went to a little property outside Kilcoy, and they had all these rondavels, and they were, which is a round African house, right? And each one was themed with an African animal, and they put us in the giraffe rondavel, and the giraffe was his favourite animal.
Yeah.
And he was buried with a giraffe, looked like a toy one.
Yeah.
And then I thought, that's two. We're driving home after that 2 days later, and my brother was in front of us, and we got towards Gin, and he called me up on the phone and said, do you want to pull in for a meal? We said, yep. So he pulled into a pub we'd never been in before, and we walked into the dining room, and there on the wall was a picture of a giraffe. And I said, that's three. That'll do me. And so from then on, we talked to him, and some of the stuff that he was able to do for the family, and we talked to the girls and said, look, your brother's available for you to talk to. And she said to me, he's very powerful. He's a very powerful spirit, this medium. Anyway, and he was, like, some of the stuff he could do was just phenomenal. And you know, I don't know whether you want to go into some of the stories, some of the things he did, but it was
No. Let's. If you're happy to go there, I mean, this for me is some of the most important stuff that needs to be said and people need to hear. I think.
I will go there because if people are grieving the loss of somebody, there's stuff in here that's helpful. For that reason, I'll go there.
Totally.
Kelly, our eldest daughter, who works in RCS now and runs the show at home, one of our senior management, she was in Spain and she was walking the Camino. Anyway, she was wandering along and taking photographs and ginning around, and knowing Kel, she would have started on the trail late for the morning, and it got dark, and she had no idea where she was or what she could do or where she could go. And she didn't panic. She sat down and she spoke to Sean and said, Sean, and we just speak to him like he's there.
Yeah.
Mate, you know, I'm lost. I need to find a town. I need to find where to go tonight. Give me a hand. And within probably 10 minutes, she heard this little bell ringing. And these two little dogs came out of the darkness, and one of them had a bell on its collar. And it came up to her, they both came up to her, and then they turned around and they walked off. And she said, all right, well, there's my sign, I'll follow the dogs. So she followed them, and they got ahead, and you know, they were in the dark that she could hear, so she followed the sound. And then at one stage they got too far ahead and she couldn't hear the bell. So she just stopped again and said to Sean, I can't hear them, can you send them back? And back came the dogs. And so she followed them, and she got to the end of a village, and then she knew where she was and where she had to go. And she said the dogs just vanished. Anyway, just after that, Kel was telling us the story, and then Stace was looking for, she's a naturopath, and she was looking for some premises in Gladstone to set up a holistic practice. And she'd found those premises in a bigger building that was set up exactly like she wanted. But I think it was going to be, no, it wasn't set up like she wanted. It was open, and then she designed it the way she wanted it, and it was going to cost her 50 grand to do the fit out. And she rang me up in tears and said, Dad, I can't afford a 50 grand fit out. And I said, all right, no way. I said, sit down tonight and have a chat to Sean, see what he can do. The next morning, the real estate agent rings up and said, Stace, the people 3 doors down from that one in the same building rang me last night. They want to break their lease in a month's time, and that office was once set up as a doctor's surgery, and would you be interested in having a look at it? She walked in, had a look at it, and it was set up as she had designed.
Wow.
The one sort of 2 buildings away within the same set of building, the same set of office blocks. Anyway,
it was perfect.
And it was absolutely perfect. It just needed to be cleaned up. So within 24 hours, he delivered on that. So then I said to him, I sat down and I said, mate, you've done a fantastic job for Kel and Stacey. I said, what about you give Roz a hand? And so...
You gave him a challenge.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Within 2 weeks, she'd had a transfer to the school that she wanted to go to the position she wanted, and her husband had a $10,000 rise.
Wow. How?
And that sort of stuff, just when we asked, he would deliver.
And it's what, just getting back to the spirit group we have, and we talk about, nature spirits and elementals, and there's plenty. I can't see them, but I'm sure they're all
I've seen them a couple of times.
Have you?
Yeah, nature spirits I've seen. When I really concentrate, I can see them.
Well, that's a I don't know if honour's the right word, but clearly they only do that when they reckon the observer can handle it. So that's fantastic. There's a great book I picked up the other day, Ogilvy Crombie.
Yeah.
If you know him?
Yeah.
Fascinating stuff.
Yeah.
I found it. I stayed at a mate's place the other couple of days ago, and it just jumped out at me. Hadn't heard of him, and I got goosebumps just thinking about it. But and the message there, and he talks to Pan.
Yeah.
And is they're just, and as are angels and archangels and so on, they're just looking to help, and they're just like literally standing around going, give me something to do, because that's my gig.
Our problem is we're too ignorant to ask.
Yeah. How I mean, is there kind of a protocol or an etiquette, when one wants to approach or engage with a loved one that they've lost? Or
well, with Sean, it was just a conversation, just whenever it was necessary. I used to use him when I was flying, so if I was flying and I got into a tricky situation or there was a bit of cloud around, I'd just say, Sean, can you just open it up so I can get back down the safe way? And she'd just open up, like there'd be holes there, whatever I needed a hole in the clouds, there'd be one. And like he could do stuff really, really quickly. And it'd be just a normal conversation. I didn't have to get into any space or anything like that. But to talk to nature spirits, Aboriginal spirits, tree spirits, a lot of those things I find, or animal spirits, I find I have to bring myself into a sort of a fairly meditative type of state.
Okay.
Try and get into the alpha state.
Yeah. How do you do? What do you do? Is it breathing? Is it?
Well, I did a course on alpha dynamics, and that sort of taught me how to get into the alpha state fairly quickly. And so I still have some of that ability. I don't practice it enough, but it sort of, again, it comes back to intention, and you just got to shut off everything, and when your mind's quiet, then you know that you can actually start focusing. And sometimes it might take you half an hour or so to get to it. Sometimes it might take you minutes to get to that state. So I find to talk to nature spirits, but sometimes it can be really fast, and sometimes it comes to me. So one of the most beautiful experiences I've ever had was 3 years ago. I was in the States, and I was on a big ranch. This guy had 600,000 acres of country, and we met with him for dinner the night before, and there was a group of us driving around, and anyway, he'd raised the wolves, and he said, I'm losing 6% of my herd every year to wolves. And he said, the animals, the cattle, they've got no mark on them, they're not eating them. He said, I don't know what it is, but I'm finding animals dead, and I'm sure that's the wolves. And he said, I've sat out at night with a rifle waiting for the wolves to come up the track. And he said, and then I go to bed and I'll look out the window and they'll come up the track, but they didn't come up the track while I was sitting there with the rifle. And anyway, he said, we see him, we'll shoot him. And he just kept going on about it. Anyway, after he'd done it a couple of times, I just quietly said to him, I think I can do something about that. And he just ignored that and kept going, and then came up the next morning and I said, I think we can do something about that. And he just kept going and ignored it. And that happened 3 or 4 times. Anyway, we're driving back to the homestead and we're going to leave the property. And next minute, I get this thing go bang in my head that just says, you have to talk to us before you leave the property. And I knew it was the wolves.
Yep.
And he's sitting beside me. There was people in the back. I didn't want to embarrass him. So I quietly said to him, look, I think I can do something with the wolves. I said, when we get to the homestead, I need to go off quietly and I need to talk to them and I need to negotiate with them. But I'm going to do a negotiation. And for it to work, whatever I negotiate, you have to be prepared to stick to. Do you want me to do this? And he said, yeah, I'm happy for you to do that. So we got back to the homestead and I just wandered up to the edge of the scrub, and like it was instant. I didn't have to get into any state because they were so wanting to have a conversation.
Yeah.
And for some reason, they knew that I'd been thinking wolves for 24 hours. And so they knew that, they got that message. And then they contacted me and said, you've got to talk to us. Right? And so I sat down and I said, right, you know why I'm here. Yep. Like the answers were coming back just instant. And there were 4 packs, and I was communicating with the male and female alphas in each pack. But I was dealing with 4 packs at once. So 8 animals.
Wow.
And all coordinate. They were just all coming back instantly. And so I said, right, this is a negotiation. Yep. You know that there's been animals dying. Yep. So I said, right, from the perspective of the owner, you cannot, this is what the deal is going to be, you cannot chase them, scare them, eat them, or anything like that, right? I went through a series of things that...
Conditions.
Conditions that they couldn't do. Do you agree with that? Yep. Do you understand that if you break that, he has the right to shoot you or poison you? Yep, understood. And it just went really smoothly and really fast. And then I said, is there anything you want in return?
Yeah, I was going to say, they're going to get to that bit.
Yeah, and the answer instantly came back, yes.
Yeah.
And then I'm sitting there thinking, what the hell is it? Like, I had no idea. And then they told me, they said, we want access to all the water. And the emphasis was on all. And he'd just put in 30 kilometres of pipe and troughs right through the landscape.
Right.
And they wanted access to the troughs. They didn't want to have to walk 15 miles back to a spring or a creek somewhere. They wanted access to the troughs where the animals were. So I agreed. And anything else? No, that's it. And there was only one point in all of that where there was one hesitation from one animal, and it hesitated for probably a second and a half.
Wow.
Before agreeing. And that was agreeing to be shot if they broke the rules. But the communication was just fast and clear and like perfect. And you could see, like, I could sense they were sitting there, and they said to me, they said, we've been waiting for some human to talk to us for so long. And I thought, what a privilege, I was picked out of the crowd to talk to them. And I never saw them. Didn't know where they were. They were somewhere in the landscape. You don't have to be. It's subtle energy. It can work over distances. Anyway, the coincidence in this is, I went back and said to him, what the deal was. And I said, you have to agree to this. None of your staff now, nobody that comes onto this place can do anything to harm wolves.
Or the deal will be off.
Or the deal will be off. I said, that's the deal. Anyway, that was August. And in November that year, Nicole Ragland was out here from the US. And her boyfriend, who was a lawyer, happened to be on the property of this bloke, Nelson. And they were negotiating with some Indians about some water rights or land rights and stuff. Anyway, I said to Nicole, ask, whatever his name was, ask him to ask Nelson whether he's had any trouble with the wolves.
Oh, yeah.
And, because, what a coincidence. That she was just visiting Australia and never planned to visit Australia.
Yeah.
She just happened to be, her boyfriend happened to be on that property, happened to be talking to this particular bloke, and I'm at the other end of it.
Yeah, yeah.
And they were, the reason it came up is they'd been talking about me.
Yeah, right.
The two guys in the States. And Nicole joined the dots. And I said, go back and ask them, has he had any trouble with the wolves? And she said, what's that about? I had to explain to her because she didn't want to ask. Anyway, and nothing. Had not lost a beast.
And how long had that been? What was that?
That had been 4 or 5 months at that stage.
Yeah, right, nice.
I haven't had a check-in with him since. I had a check-in with the wolves recently. They contacted me again.
Oh, really? How did that come through? Was it just
come through? Just says, it's just
a thing.
Just talk to us.
Yeah, right.
It just, I don't know where it is or where it comes from or what it is. It just happens. It doesn't happen very often. That doesn't happen to me all the time. That's a very rare thing.
Do you think you have to have a certain sensitivity, appreciation, acknowledgement?
Well, the process wasn't new to me. So we have a lot of dangerous snakes at home, and I have a lot of grandkids. And so I've negotiated with our snakes for a lot of years now.
Yeah.
And we have a boundary that I negotiated with the snakes as to where the venomous snakes can come to.
Oh, yeah.
And they're not past, but I'll allow the carpet snakes and the tree snakes and the non-venomous stuff to come in wherever they like around the house. But the venomous guys to stay away. And I have not seen a venomous snake inside there other than little ones. Now, every so often I find ones that are about a foot long, and I've realised that the snakes don't pass that through the next generation. So it's only the generation I'm talking to. Yeah. But when I talked to the wolves, I was very conscious, and I said to the pack leaders, you guys have to pass this down through the generations. I want you, and this is part of the deal, that this message goes down with generations, and the pack leaders will control the pups and the adolescents, and they agreed to that. Whereas with snakes, you don't get that same agreement. And
because they're not like packs. There's not like you're off, kid.
Yeah, you're gone. You lay the egg and you're out. And they're gone.
Yeah. So
the only venomous snakes I find now are stuffed about a foot long, little babies.
And they don't know the deal.
They don't know the deal. And I had a brown snake one day. I was there was a group of rocks, and I was just playing around near the rocks, and he just reared up, and it could have struck me. He was about 6 inches from me, and didn't, and just went straight back down into the rocks. And
was he in your house zone?
Yeah, he was in the zone. He shouldn't have been there. He was a brown, and he shouldn't have been there.
Do you think he was he knew the deal, but he was being a bit cheeky?
No, he didn't know. He didn't know the deal. He was too young.
Yeah, right.
He didn't know the deal, but he didn't strike, and that's because the deal I've got with them then is because we've got 30 acres, right? So they can have the rest. Yeah. So what I say to them, look, there's other animals out there that you can have all the insects you like, whatever you like, but part of the deal is you do not attack or affect any of our domestic animals or any humans that walk into your space.
Yep. And
one morning I had a black snake, and the boundary is right beside my veggie patch. And there was a black snake had come he was within about 2 or 3 inches of where I'd set that boundary, the psychic boundary. And he was just sitting there, and he just watched me in the garden. I had no fear of him at all, and I went away and I came back and he was still there, and then after probably 10 to 15 minutes of him sitting there, he turned around and went away from where that boundary was.
Yeah, right. He was respectful of the boundary.
Respectful of the boundary.
Yeah. I love that shit. And and back to Abercrombie, Ogilvy, Crombie, the first chapter of the book, you know, experiences with nature spirits. I can't remember the one. He says he's in the Botanic Gardens in Edinburgh, and he's sitting there and he's sort of chilling out with the beech tree behind him, and hearing this, sort of feeling and hearing the sap in the trunk, and he's really chilling with the tree. And anyway, he sees this thing, as jumping around, and comes up to him and doesn't think he can see him, and whoa, hello, he can see me. And then the first question that the little fawn asks him is, why are you humans so stupid? Which is kind of, and I love their childlike kind of way, and they're just, that's their question, because it just comes out of their mouth. There's nothing hidden there.
And that's what I see when I see the nature spirits. I see these little things jumping and excited to be talking,
dancing,
and to be asked to help. They get so excited. They're very excitable little things, and it's amazing excitement level.
Let's do a quick, I'm just conscious of time. You are a champion for talking. This is definitely a two-parter, and I'm hoping my little generator behind the bushes isn't going to run out, but I do want to just touch on quickly Patrick McManaway. I'm going to put some notes for Patrick in the show notes, because I've done two of his subtle energy level 1 subtle energy courses. The first one I did was actually at the Gaylong Monastery near Burrawa, which is fascinating. And then I'll pop him in there. Read all about Patrick. It's fascinating stuff. Such a lovely man. And the first time I really appreciated the use of the word grace and reverence.
Yes,
because that's just him all the time, isn't it?
Yeah, it's just.
Is it when are we going to bring him out again? When's he allowed?
I don't know when he's allowed. We'll get him back when we can.
I hope so.
I don't want to risk him having quarantine or anything.
No.
I guess pretty sure he'll be a non-vaxxer.
Yeah, I reckon. And I was telling the guys last night about at the I think it might have happened at both of the courses, how we had dinner and drinks and so on, and the wine, like changing the taste of the wine.
Yeah.
That was hysterical. It was so funny. You'll have to go to his course if you want to know what we're talking about. But it is such a good use of 3 days of your time. The other thing, last kind of thing before we wrap this main part up, we've only got like a little quick 10 minutes after that, Terry. There's so much more that we could be talking about. We have covered a huge amount. I want to leave that there. Landmark. Can we just touch on that for a minute?
Yeah.
Because it's interesting how, and it's sometimes I discover it in the interview, and sometimes I knew already, because you kind of get the vibe of my guests that have done Landmark. And we're not talking Landmark, the old Landmark of...
Talking Landmark Forum.
Yeah.
Or Landmark Education.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, I did Landmark, I reckon it would have been in the 90s. And since then I've encouraged all our staff to do Landmark. All my kids have, I think one hasn't actually. She's got away with it.
Not anymore.
Yeah. And Pam, we've all done Landmark, and to me it was a massive release. It just removed a whole lot of pressure from my mind, a whole lot of rubbish. Doesn't need to be there. I've found it really, really powerful. It's been life-changing for some people. I've encouraged a lot of people to do Landmark. Others have found it just too confronting and probably too shut down to actually get anything out of it. Do you want to explain, like, without going into all the detail, like what's not so much the technique, but what's special about the way that they can kind of Well, the analogy,
where's the turning point in there?
The analogy they use is peeling the rings off the onion, you know, and we're all got stuff we carry around with us, and at various stages of our lives we get rid of various rings, and hopefully by the time we're ready to disappear we're just about back to the core of the onion, you know.
There's nothing left.
But they take you through process. It's really about process, and it's my theory of it is that the worse your childhood is, the more you get out of the Landmark Forum, which is the first course. And I think that, and if you've had a really brilliant upbringing, then there's always stuff you can deal with. But I've had people come back and just say, oh no, there was nothing in that for me, there was nothing I could learn out of that, when I just think, geez, that's a closed mind, that's a really tight onion. And
I don't know many people who've done that though. Like have come out. I know someone wanted to got to smoko the first day and probably went, oh shit, this is too much, I'm going to just bloody explode, and they've bailed. But,
I always say to people, get through the first 2 days. You'll wonder. I always say you'll wonder why I would have recommended it for the first 2 days, but hang in, because the real benefit comes the longer you stay. So don't walk. Because
hang in.
It's very American in the way they do it, and that's very off-putting to a lot of Australians. But that's part of the process.
Yeah, challenging.
Is to understand what's pressing your buttons, and why is it pressing your buttons? Why do you allow that to press your buttons? And it can only annoy you if you allow it to annoy you. Yeah. So in other words, you're choosing for that to annoy you, and that's really one of the things you learn, is that how you respond is actually is your choice. You know? And what you've chosen, how you've chosen to respond to any circumstance at any time of the day or at any point in your life. And it's how we choose to respond. And sometimes it's just habit, or it's old systems that give us that response. But we can break that, you know, by choosing how we respond to things.
And we choose to attach meaning to events in our life that really stick with us, don't they?
That's correct.
You know, from childhood.
Yeah, and it's, when they explain it, there's a lot of good reason for that. So as a child, you have to figure out a way to behave to get through the world, to survive. And so an event will come along, one simple little thing will come along, and that will create a behaviour in you which you'll carry with you for the rest of your life. A decision you made when you were 4-year-old or something, which doesn't actually work very well for you for the rest of your life.
No.
And one of the ones I really remember along those lines, as an illustration of that, was a woman who felt very unworthy and not good enough. And she said when she was about 4 or 5, her mother was coming home with the shopping one afternoon, and so she hid in a cupboard in the hallway, and Mum's loaded up with all the shopping and comes through the door, and this little kid bounces out of the door, you know, surprise, Mum, surprise, Mum drops everything and got up this little kid for scaring her and so on. And then so the little kid thought, right, I'm not good enough, and so I need to find a different way to behave. I can't do that anymore. I had to behave in a different way, and for the rest of her life she behaved in a different way. And then through the process actually tracked that behaviour all the way back to that incident. And so it's that sort of stuff I think is very powerful, if you can go back and track down some of this stuff. You know, one of my biggest issues, which we haven't talked about actually, is money. And I have a what's called a very poor money blueprint, and our money blueprint is determined by our upbringing again while we're very, very young, and it's around the language we hear when we're being brought up, and it sets the tone of our subconscious. So if we hear things like money doesn't grow on trees, you know, rich people are evil, they've taken from the poor to get rich, you know, they're greedy, you know, all this stuff, and I've identified over 200 of these phrases around that are negative around money. We grow up with some of that stuff, and we create a subconscious belief system around what we're allowed to earn in terms of money. And I've done a lot of work on that as well, and I've shifted it a bit, but I know that I still have a fairly poor money blueprint.
It's a worthiness thing, isn't it? I guess, isn't it? Like, I'm not worthy to earn more than whatever, or is it kind of?
It's not about not worthy, because I think I'm worthy, but it's about being able to accept cash.
Yeah.
That there's a So what happens is that if let's say your blueprint was at 100,000 a year earnings, right?
Yep.
And you're below that, everything will sail along and you'll start to go really well. Say you're in business, right? Things will go really well. And then you'll get well above that 100,000 a year earnings. And then your subconscious will self-sabotage and bring you back down below. You'll do stuff that actually knocks you right back down below that 100,000 again. Yeah. And that 100,000 will grow with inflation. It grows over time. And then we tend to fluctuate around up and down over that. And I got to a point in my life where I read about this stuff and I realised what was happening, and I just got sick of it. And I was given a book for nothing. It was called The Millionaire's Mind, I think it was called. So I read that, but in the back of the book was a free seminar. But the seminar was in
Cincinnati,
Northern California, anyway.
Yeah, somewhere.
Yeah. Where's Boeing?
Not your time zone, anyway.
Yeah. Anyway. So I jumped on a plane and I flew.
Oh, seminar as in, because I guess it wouldn't have been Zoom back then.
No. This is back in the old days.
This is in person?
Yeah. It was a 3-day workshop on overcoming this money blueprint stuff.
Yeah.
So I jumped on a plane on a Thursday, arrived over there on a Thursday, jumped into this course on a Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and flew home again on Monday. And the Yanks couldn't believe that you'd fly all the way to the States to do a free course.
Yeah.
Yeah. But that's how good my money blueprint was. It was free, but it just cost.
But I'm not going to spend an extra cent by bloody. Yeah.
It cost me $5,000 to get there and back.
Yeah.
But it really didn't shift my subconscious. And what did was, one day we were sitting down and my board was saying to me, "Well, how much money are you going to make this year in RCS?" And I said, "Oh, we're not really going to make any money." And I said, "That's not the purpose of RCS. The purpose of RCS is to change agriculture."
Yeah.
And the board said to me, "You got a problem, Boyd." They organised and individually paid for me to go and see a shrink. And I spent 5 hours with a shrink working on my money blueprint, but working at the subconscious level. Did
the shrink? So the shrink, you kind of knew that was the paradigm needed to be shifted. Were they an expert in this sort of thing?
Yes. He was a shrink that works with share traders.
Oh, okay.
Working on, again, it's just that, the money blueprint when you're trading, and being able to get back up again after a fall, or accept a loss, and all those sort of things. So, but that was his specialty. And
what any sort of tips?
Well, it worked for me because we actually did it through meditation, and he took me into meditation, several meditations, and took me right back into my past. And we were able to identify exactly where a lot of that, the thinking or the blueprint was, and where it had come from, and then we were able to turf it out. And that did make a difference. Still not brilliant.
Well, listen, there's an interesting podcast, I can't remember the name, but it's a lady in the States who, she talks in millions all the time, and she's throwing around, it's almost, I mean, it's maybe that's part of my money blueprint, so it sounds vulgar in a way, the way she talks about it in my mind, but she talks a lot of sense, and she talks about I guess that's maybe where I got the worthiness thing from. It's like, and the intention and the affirmations that she talks about, about bringing it your way, and actually sort of, I guess it's a law of attraction kind of thing too. She's putting in there, but she's like ball breaker, but she kind of gets the intentional kind of side of it all as well.
Yeah, well, I got a lot out of Sarah McCrum's book, Love Money, Money Loves You. And it's about the consciousness of money. And it's a book that was channeled to her by the energy of money. And it talks about humans in the third person. You humans, like your nature spirits talk about us. You just don't know. You don't know how to handle us. You don't know how to talk to us. You don't know how to deal with us. And it's a very powerful book.
Love Money, Money Loves You.
Money Loves You.
Okay.
And Sarah will be a keynote speaker at the conference.
Yep. Cool. Terry, I reckon we give it up. It's bloody. We're doing a Joe Rogan. It's 3 hours. I can't believe it.
Jesus.
Yeah, it is. And we'll just do a quick little one to wrap it up. Yeah, I know it's incredible. But well, I'm not surprised because you are such a fond of information, and it's a lovely little spot here. We've escaped the sun, or I have at least. For those who, this will be a two-parter for sure. For those who want to hear a bit more of Terry, some specific questions, and you're not a Patreon member, just sign up to Patreon. Get on our website, charliearnott.com.au, and for a cost of 2 coffees a month that you probably didn't even need, you can get some transcriptions of all the interviews, monthly webinar with one of the guests. Each month we have a webinar with the guests or the previous or future guests of the Regenerative Journey. I do a weekly video, little bloggy thing as well, a vlog I think that'd be, and a communication and community of like-minded people, extra stuff. So you guys are going to get the next bit with Terry. Thank you everyone for being on this thing. This is my longest by about an hour, I'd have to say, but not surprising. And Terry, I really appreciate your the conversation that you just took it where you felt and you were comfortable to take it. We went everywhere, and I think that's really important, and it just shows, and I trust the listeners and the viewers on YouTube, it gives them probably only really a snippet of what you've been up to for the last however many decades. And Terry's actually, I think, about 110, but he looks a lot younger just because of the way he lives, the biome, the bathing with his family all those years ago. He does look incredibly youthful. So Terry, thank you for your honesty and your vulnerability and just the wonderful stories you've shared. And for anyone who wants to hear more, go to Patreon.
Thank you, Charlie. And I think one of the things I got to give credit to for my health and longevity is my wonderful wife Pam and my children and the relationships that we all have. It makes a hell of a difference. Well,
I know, as a little sign off, that one thing that RCS and Grazing for Profit and the Executive Link and all the support programs you guys offer, one of the things that stood out for me when I moved into that space was the importance of people. That wasn't something that was really front of mind. It was all sorts of other things, but the importance of good people, family connection, community contribution, and having good people on your team. And so that's been, our focus for many years now, and always room for improvement. But I'm really pleased that was introduced to you by you and your team, and I can't emphasise how important that is to us. So thank you, Terry. We're going to cut this one and then do another quick one. Well, you have to take some photos too. I'm under instruction to take photos of you and I. Okay, thanks, Terry.